Adesuwa had always believed she was meant for more. Born and raised in a small village in Edo State, she had spent her childhood watching the wealthy women from Lagos parade designer bags and travel to distant lands on Instagram. She envied their glossy lifestyles, expensive cars, luxurious dinners, and endless vacations. For years, she had told herself that one day, she would leave her humble beginnings behind and step into a world that was far more glamorous, a world where money flowed like water and every desire could be satisfied. Her parents, simple people who had never strayed far from the farming life, were concerned when Adesuwa, now 22, announced her plan to move to Lagos. Her father, a kind-hearted man with graying hair and a constant worry in his eyes, was the first to speak. Adesuwa, Lagos is not a place for everyone. It is dangerous, filled with temptations. You don't know what you face out there. Her mother, who had spent her entire life caring for their small farm, only shook her head. Don't go, my daughter. There's no place like home. But Adesuwa was resolute. I want more, Mama, she said. Lagos has everything. It's where dreams come true. The village seemed to close in around her, suffocating her with its simplicity. She was ready for something bigger, something that would lift her out of her mundane reality. So, with little more than a small suitcase and a heart full of ambition, Adesuwa boarded the bus to Lagos. Lagos hit her like a tidal wave of sound, color, and confusion. The city was as chaotic as it was beautiful, an endless sea of people hustling to survive, their faces full of dreams. The buildings towered above her, casting long shadows on the streets below. She had never seen anything like it. There was something intoxicating about the city, its pulse quickening in her chest. Emeka, her childhood friend who had moved to Lagos 2 years earlier, met her at the bus park. Welcome to the good life, Emeka said with a dazzling smile, her dark hair blowing in the breeze as she held up a designer handbag. Her appearance, pristine and fashionable, made Adesuwa feel as though she were stepping into a different world altogether. Emeka led her into a waiting cab, chattering excitedly about all the places they would visit. You're going to love it here, Adesuwa, she promised. This is just the beginning. When they arrived at Emeka's apartment in Lekki, Adesuwa was in awe. It was nothing like the small, cramped houses back home. The apartment was sleek and modern, with white marble floors and windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a panoramic view of the city. The furniture was elegant, the kind Adesuwa had only seen in magazines. This is just temporary, Emeka explained. I'm saving up for something bigger. Soon, we'll be living on Banana Island. But for now, enjoy the luxury. You're part of it now. That evening, Emeka took her to a high-end lounge, a trendy hotspot in Victoria Island, where the rich and powerful came to play. The atmosphere was electric, filled with the sound of laughter, music, and the clink of expensive glasses. Adesuwa marveled at the crowd, people dressed in the finest clothes, their jewelry sparkling under the soft lighting. It was a world that Adesuwa had only seen in photos. She had never imagined that she could belong here. Emeka led her to a table where a group of well-dressed men were seated. The men were chatting and laughing, their personalities as polished as their clothes. Emeka introduced Adesuwa to the group, but it was Emeka who immediately caught her attention. He was tall, dark-skinned, and had an aura of confidence that made him stand out in any crowd. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit and a gold Rolex that caught the light every time he moved. New face, Emeka said, his voice smooth and deliberate as he leaned in toward Adesuwa. His eyes locked onto hers, and she felt an instant connection. There was something magnetic about him, something dangerous and exciting. Emeka nudged her, whispering, "That's Emeka. He's one of the big boys in Lagos. No one knows exactly what he does, but he's loaded." Emeka's gaze remained on Adesuwa, and in that moment, she felt as though the entire world had shifted. He flashed her a smile that could melt anyone's heart, and she knew, without a doubt, that her life was about to change. Over the next few weeks, Adesuwa found herself swept up in a whirlwind romance with Emeka. He took her to the best restaurants, bought her the finest clothes, and made her feel like a queen. He told her she deserved the best, and he was more than willing to provide it. Adesuwa's modest upbringing seemed a distant memory as she stepped into a world of private jets, champagne toasts, and luxury shopping sprees. She had never known a life like this. Every day felt like a dream, and she couldn't get enough. The more time she spent with Emeka, the more she fell in love with the life he offered her. The trips to Dubai, the nights spent in luxurious hotels, and the endless designer handbags were a far cry from the life she had known back in Edo State. But it wasn't just the material things that kept her close to Emeka. He had a charm that was undeniable. He was funny, kind, and incredibly attentive. He made her feel special in a way no one ever had before. In his arms, Adesuwa felt invincible, as though nothing could touch her. However, as the days passed, Adesuwa began to notice certain things about Emeka that unsettled her. He was always on his phone, constantly receiving calls that he never seemed to want to discuss. He would disappear for hours, sometimes without explanation, leaving her to wonder where he was and what he was doing. One night, as they sat in his penthouse apartment, Adesuwa watched Emeka receive a call. He answered it quickly, his voice growing tense as he spoke. "Don't worry about it," he said, his words sharp. "I'll handle it." When he hung up, his expression had shifted from calm to something darker. "What's wrong?" Adesuwa asked, her curiosity getting the better of her. Emeka glanced at her, his jaw tightening. "It's nothing," he said quickly. "Just some business I need to take care of." His tone made it clear that he didn't want to talk about it. Adesuwa didn't press him further, but the unease lingered. She had begun to wonder what kind of business Emeka was really involved in. The luxury, the endless flow of money, and the private jets, was it all too good to be true? A few days later, Emeka handed Adesuwa a small package. "Keep this with you when we travel to South Africa tomorrow," he said nonchalantly. Adesuwa frowned, unsure what was inside. "What's in it?" she asked, her voice betraying a hint of concern. Emeka's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "It's nothing. Just keep it with you. You trust me, don't you?" Adesuwa hesitated but nodded. Her trust in him had been absolute up until this point, and she didn't want to question him now. The next day, they arrived at the airport for their flight to South Africa. Adesuwa was excited for the adventure, but as they approached the security checkpoint, her heart began to race. "Please step aside, ma'am," one of the security officers said, his voice stern as he waved Adesuwa over. Adesuwa's stomach churned. What was happening? She glanced nervously at Emeka, but he remained calm, standing several feet away. The officers opened her bag and pulled out the small package Emeka had given her. Adesuwa's pulse quickened as they unwrapped it. Inside, they found several fake credit cards and wads of counterfeit dollars. Her hands trembled as the officers began to ask questions. "What is this?" one of them demanded. "Why do you have this in your possession?" Adesuwa opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She couldn't believe what was happening. Emeka had never mentioned anything about this. Hours later, Adesuwa found herself sitting in a cold, sterile interrogation room. Her hands were cuffed to the chair, and her heart raced as the officers grilled her about the package. She explained over and over that she hadn't known what was inside, but they didn't believe her. One officer sneered at her. "You girls always say you didn't know. But you love the money, don't you?" The word stung. Adesuwa felt the weight of her choices pressing down on her. This life, this dream life, had come at a cost. The money, The luxury, it had all seemed so perfect. But now, she was paying the price. She thought of Emeka, his handsome smile, his kind words, the promises he had made. But where was he now? Why hadn't he come to help her?